I manage digital analytics and enterprise data warehouse as Fostech, and I would like to welcome rest of my panel up here. Casey, we saw his presentation yesterday, and he has been working with Oregon. He has been working with Community Credit Union and managing their business intelligence. And with Casey, I have collaborated in past. We do some few webinars. Then we have Chris with us over here. He is the adjunct professor at UC Berkeley, teaching machine learning and while doing a consulting firm, Decision Patterns. Then we also have Doug. He is the CTO and co-founder of Fractional Media. It's an ad technology company that uses machine learning to optimize ad buying. And then we have Steven here with us. He has more than 30 years of experience in financial industry. He is CEO and Chief Data Officer of FinTech DSC. With that, please see your booklets for more detail on everybody's background, and we're just gonna jump right into it. There we go. So I love this one. Basically, we all in this room have known to how to coexist and compete with large financial institutions, but landscape, regulatory speaking, and in terms of competition has been changing very fast on us. We have competition coming from every possible side, and the thing to note is what I want to take away is we can look at all aspects of our business and somebody is out there to outcompete us. Every aspect of it. If we are into lending, somebody is trying to figure it out how to lend in 3 clicks. If we are giving out auto loans, somebody is figuring it out how to just automate the whole process itself. So we are seeing competition coming from every side, horizontally and vertically. And the idea here is to how can we effectively compete in this changing scenario? And that's where the data analytics comes in. This happens to be my favorite slide. I always talk about it. I say models are easy. We can build them 2 a day. But this is what we call the framework. This is where we set up the process, is why are we building analytics model? What's the purpose of them? It's almost like if you don't know what question you are answering, most probably your model is just going to die on your machine itself. It will never see the day of light. So asking those obvious questions that who is solving this problem for? If we ever decide to build a model, do you have a business partner that will take it, operationalize it, and your members will benefit from it? How are you going to solve it? You don't have data to solve every problem. Have we looked back saying, do we have the data? Even if we have the data, do we have the talent to solve it? We might have all the data we need and nobody that knows how to solve it. So asking those hows and whys are very critical. If we can get even half of this right, we are on the right path. So then now we talk about a couple of use cases, what we have been doing, and this is actually a particularly interesting use case. This is something I've been actually working with Chris over here, and same model what we just talked applies over here, that we all are interested in how to find who's gonna get delinquent. If I can tell who's gonna get delinquent before they get delinquent, we can do something about it. There are operational implications of it, there are financial implications of it, and it makes the life of whole credit union a lot easier if we can tell who, when, and how they will get delinquent. And the only reason this even works is we have a business partner that's interested in solving this theme. And that's where the whole cycle comes along, is saying we have a business partner that wants to know the answer. And not just the answer. Answer is the easier part. We can build a model, give you a prediction score, and say this person is 50% likely to go delinquent. That's an easy part to it. What do you do with that 50% score? That's where those hows and whys are really important. The chart you see over there is our first iteration of it. So the another critical thing to note over there that whenever we talk to, say, business users is, I can talk statistical jargon, say type 1 error, type 2 error, and we can go down that path, but we always ask is, what can you live with? If I tell you that I'm going to be right about 30% of time, is that good enough? Or if I tell you I'm going to be right about 60% of time, that's good enough. So those are the interaction that you want to have before you build a model, not after, because by that time you have already too far down that road. Maybe it will take you a lot longer to undo it. So setting it up right is as critical as doing it right. This is something Mike talked about in his keynote speak yesterday, that we have been working with this one, and this is another example of doing things fast and failing fast. So this particular result we see over here, we got there in about 7th or 8th iteration, but we took about few days to do each one of them. We built one, we tested it, we failed. We built another one, we tested it, we failed, and we continuously improved upon it. And the other part of it was that we were aligned with other business units saying that model in itself doesn't tell me anything till the time I actually take it to the real users and see those results. I build the model, so I'm always biased. To me, they look beautiful and they perform perfectly all the time. But when we take it out, they might not come back as I send them out. And that's where the feedback loops are really important, that whatever you're building, is it a live learning system? Does it take the feedback from member into it, or is it a static, standalone thing? Most of the time, static alone things, stand-up things are basically redundant by the time they leave your laptop. So keep in mind that part is really important, that whatever we build needs to stand the test of the time, at least for a few months, if not longer. And if I could leave you guys just with 3 things that we have learned. When it comes to modeling, perfect is always the enemy of good. You never have good enough model, you never have good enough data, and we can go through the cycle. Can you take the accuracy up 2 more %? Business users always want a higher number. So idea is to be able to iterate on it. How do you say that something is good enough? And that's where the second thing is, that don't get into analysis paralysis where you just crunching the numbers. Those are not just numbers. Till the time they meet real members, those are just numbers. They do nothing. Try, learn, and adapt. Otherwise, that model will die off before it leaves you. Thank you.
All right, so I think we're just going to take about 5 minutes to introduce ourselves here. So we've got a couple slides. So, nope, green, the one with the arrow this way. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, all right, so my intro, I'm with Oregon Community Credit Union. We're pretty small, small to mid-size, and in Oregon, branching out a little bit. But most of our branches, we got 9 in Eugene and Salem, 1.5 billion in assets, 300 employees. We have a pretty big BI team for that big of an organization. We've got, there's 6 of us and 3 interns. So we've got pretty big for a BI shop, right? But we don't have any analysts really embedded in the organization, what I would call analysts. So we're doing a lot of that heavy lifting, and I'm not saying that's the best model. Please don't take that meaning. But I'll show you what some of the effects are of doing that. I don't know if you can kind of read this very well or not, but this is the growth of our open active projects in business intelligence. From 2009, in our humble beginnings, we had a couple people. Each of those annotations there, for the most part, are adding 1 FTE, and you can see the effect of adding more people is more work. A lot of that, yeah. A lot of that is because when we produce more answers, it leads to more questions, and hopefully they're better questions. I don't know how many people saw the analytics challenge yesterday. That project that I presented was actually kind of a scrapyard project. I recycled a bunch of projects that I've done over the past 2 or 3 years, and was able to kind of orient them this way for this new project. So it took me about a week to put that together, and another week to kind of explain it and get it out there. So to Manoj's point, we can still fail fast, but we're building with larger and larger Lego pieces, right? We've already built some of those Lego pieces together, so we're able to stack them up. But it's leading to more work. We're forecasting 200 open tickets for really 6 of us. So that's I was telling him earlier this year, my hairline was like here. I wanted to show this graphic. I showed one slide back. This is the results of a study we did on our membership, and this just kind of underscores some of the advantages and opportunities in credit unions in analytics. Each of these dots represents a member or a household, and they're color-coded according to a profile we fit to them on the basis of a pretty massive survey. We got, I think we invited 10,000 people or so to participate, and we got 3,500 responses. So we have a very responsive membership. This is something that we see a lot in our surveys, so we're fortunate in that way. And it asked, among other things, what's the primary role of a financial institution in your mind? What do you see us as doing? We also surveyed non-members. They aren't pictured here, but we took their results too, and we gathered some demographics and behavioral traits from them, and we, through modeling, applied them to our entire membership. So these are the results. The red, I'm not going to go through all of them, but the red dots there are budget-conscious folks. And you can see, if you know anything about Oregon, they're, for the most part, in outlying rural areas. We've got the orange, which are detached. They want transactions. They don't want you to sell. They don't want the touch and feel. Buried in here, though, is one segment that I really like. And these are financial voyagers. These are people who want a lifelong ally in the financial services industry. They want to be better off 3 years from now than they are today because of their relationship with their financial institution. These folks are our target. This is the analysis that we have to say we really want to do good with these folks. Problem is, we're not doing great with them. This is a part of an age distribution graph. The light blue, again, is our financial voyagers, and it peaks right around the time they leave college. If you guys know Eugene, we're a college town. Go Ducks. And people are leaving our credit union when they leave town because we're not portable. A lot of them are going to these disruptors we've been talking about for the last couple of days. And so we see an advantage here and a threat as well in trying to appeal to the people who resonate our own brand very well. They want what we're offering, but they don't think they can take it with them. So that's just an example of what we've done with analytics in our space.
I'm going to stand.
Yes,
Too
go
much
ahead.
sitting. So I'm Chris Brown. I have wear 2 hats. One, I'm an adjunct professor in computer science. I teach machine learning and statistics. I usually do about 1 course a term, whatever they throw my way. Also, I'm a founder of a small data consultancy called Decision Patterns. We're based in the Bay Area. Berkeley, go Bears. So what I'd like to talk to you about, and I don't know which of my slides quite made it, but I have 3 things that I want to give some advice from seeing not just financial institutions that I work for, but over a broad spectrum of institutions that we work with in helping craft their data strategies, and particularly around analytics and machine learning. So the first thing I'd like to impress upon you is doing analytics and machine learning is not hard for the reasons that you might think, and is hard for different reasons. So this first data item that I want to provide you is from KD Nuggets. This is Knowledge Discovery and Data Mining group that has a big conference surrounded about developments in analytics and machine learning. And they did this poll, now it's about 1.5 years old, in August 2015, where they asked, what was the largest data set you analyzed or data mined, et cetera. And they had 459 respondents come up, and this is the distribution of the responses. Now, this is 2 groups. They went out to these groups, and these are very technical groups in a variety of industries, but fairly representative of the analytics space. And they asked this question, and this is the largest that the group did. Now, the point here is that if you look at this on a cumulative basis, you can see that most groups only work in the small data space. Most of the problems, 95% of the problems are in the small data space. So the barrier of big data and what you hear about big data for most of you, for most of the people in this industry, doesn't really apply. Most of the problems you can solve on a single high-powered box. Right? I'm not saying do it on your laptop, although sometimes you can do that, but a single high-powered box is all you need. There's no barrier to software to start doing data analytics and data mining and machine learning and intelligence. The data sizes that you deal with, and especially with people like me who come from a background of statistics and know how to sample data correctly, we don't need necessarily a whole lot of data. So a big data should not be your problem. Data is not an impediment. Data size is not an impediment to going down this road. The biggest impediment is getting out of your chair, going out and meeting with the business partners, and as Manav said, talking to them and understanding the problem, putting the flag in the ground of saying, this is where we are, this is where we need to go, and starting down that journey. So the other thing I wanted to cover is what data science does. Because I think there's this misconception of data science doing a lot of different things, and really it's kind of running back the same playbook over and over and over. And I think there's only really 6 or 7 things that data scientists routinely do. And as a leader in this area, what you want to do is build up core capabilities in these things and focus on these things. And these will, again, satisfy somewhere between 80 and 95% of your business needs if your data science group can do this. So the one big one is forecasting. Everyone wants to know where the future is. I have to be able to have a series of data in time and some other things that relate to it, and I want to know where it goes. All of you want to know where your memberships are going, where your revenues are going. Forecasting is a big, important part of it. Number 2 is rare event detection. So you see this in the risk space. You want to find where the fraud is coming from, where your bankruptcy risk, where your credit risks are coming. So rare event detection. Number 3 is relationships. This is mining on the graph, understanding how your products relate to your members, vice versa, how members proliferate, gain new members by talking to their contacts. So understanding and mining relationships is important. Number 3, you guys all want to know about segmentation. How do we break these apart? Who are our, what do you call them?
Financial voyagers.
Financial voyagers, right? So that was an example of segmentation. Number 4 is some sort of optimization. This oftentimes comes after more rote data analysis stuff. But again, here's the idea of there's something that I'm trying to improve or do or execute on. And that comes down to very often an optimization exercise. Key driver discovery is another one. What's driving these things? What's making my membership go up or go down? What's making people choose this? And then finally, design of experiments. I'm in a state, I have a couple of options to do. How do I go out and execute a design of experiments with the minimal amount of effort to go and figure out what I want to do? So these are really the 7 core things that data scientists or machine learning people do. And I would wager dollars to donuts that 95% of your problems fall in one of these categories. And the tools around these things and the expertise around these things are getting better and better. And I know you guys cringe right now at the expense of bringing someone like me on board to help you with your things, but the prices of this is falling, and it's going to become more and more commoditized in the future. And these are the things that you're going to execute on, and they fit nicely into these buckets. All right, the third thing I want to leave you with is what is the value that you get out of these things, or what can you expect of value if you deploy a machine learning thing? Early in my career, I had the fortuitous advantage to work with GE Capital people who brought, and popularized Six Sigma. What they said, and I've kind of like kept it in the back of my mind for my career and found that it's pretty much true, is that you can improve any single metric that you've been tracking by 30%. And that's end state. That's not where you're going to start, right? But 30% is your goal. Out of the gate. And you always want to know what your goals are and where you're starting to. And the people that are working for you in the machine learning and data science, they should be able to tell that. And that should be their goal of keeping you as leaders informed of where you're going. But I think 30% is a good place to start, not knowing, and that requires having good data, that you have analysis and you have an implementation plan. But my rule of thumb going out into this data unseen is you could probably get about 7% improvement. So if that 7% is not going to return the value you want, this is probably not a project that you want to start with, right? And it's about picking projects that are going to be winning for your organization. So your data science teams also have to be able to walk away from things, and you have to be able to walk away from things that you don't have the data to support, you don't have the budget to support, or other things. So that's it. My three words of wisdom there are: there's not really any big impediments to doing this. You should start, take that first step. 2, it's a limited box of things you're doing anyways, and your team should know this. And 3, know what the value you're deriving from it is, and 7% is a rule of thumb from there. And then you can ratchet it up, improve incrementally, and try and get to that 30%. In practice, it's hard to get to that 30%. Thanks.
I'm from advertising tech, not fintech. I'm the CTO and co-founder of a advertising company. We buy mobile ads for mobile devices, and we do it at very high data rates. We handle 500,000 ad requests a second, and for every ad request, we have to make a series of decisions, and these decisions are powered by machine learning models that run closed loop on data. We have to decide how much each ad impression is worth to each of our advertisers based on how much revenue we think that they will make based on feedback, based on history. Some of these machine learning models are very large. Some, for example, our Click model has billions of examples and hundreds of millions of features that go into that model, but most are much more modest and much simpler. Now, in general, this idea of using online automation to automate a decision that you make over and over and over again could be applied for a lot of different applications. For credit analysis, for risk management, for fraud detection, for churn prediction, as well as figuring out, for example, what offer to show a user on a website. In general, we often find that we make a lot of probabilistic decisions, trying to predict a probability of a rare event, some observable event. For example, you can model a sales pipeline as a series of actions that you can observe. For example, maybe a user has to click to an offer page, then fill out a form. And you can make a model that describes the probability of that click event, as well as a different model trained on that probability of completing that form. And in each case, to use this, you really need to understand what good means. And so once you have an idea of a metric of goodness, you can use that to optimize your result based on the data. In terms of building these, echoing the earlier comments, most problems do not require big data. We like to say big data means everything takes a long time. Don't need to start that way. Most problems are much more modest. A good laptop or an instance running on Amazon can usually solve your problems. And open source tools such as Pi and NumPy and Python or R can solve many of your problems. In the systems that we build, we always have 2 paths. We have a training path where we take historical data that we logged and build models. Those models are then fed into production that handle the live events. Now, it's really important to make sure that the features that you see in the live model are the same ones that you used in the historical training process. Otherwise, you're going to have a bad day. In terms of the feedback, these models are trained on a recurring basis. We train our models daily. And the wonderful thing about that is it runs as a feedback loop so that any errors or mispredictions in your model get fixed as they're retrained as new evidence comes in. Now, once you have the system in production, it's really important to monitor your predictions. These systems can break in really subtle ways, and how would you know? It seems like it works, you don't have any error messages, but maybe the predictions are just not right anymore. For example, you may have some important feature that goes into your models that changed definitions without you knowing it, or maybe it's not available right now. And the only way you'd know is that the business results just aren't there. We use a tool that I show on this chart called a calibration curve that we find is handy. We update these every day for all of our predictive models. And all we do is we take our predictions, we log them, and then we sort them from least likely to worst to best. group them together, put them into percentile cohorts, and then compare those to the outcome. If your model is working, then two lines should overlap very well. But if something breaks, those two lines will drift apart, and then you can go digging for a problem. We are hiring, so if you're interested in working on extreme scale, send me an email. Thank you.
The clicker. Let's see.
Okay, can you all hear me okay on this? Great. Stephen Simpson with FinTech Data Science and Consulting, and we help credit unions kind of manage everything that you've been hearing today. What does it mean? How can I translate it towards success and apply it at my credit union? So as we've heard several people say, the key is to start simple, have a goal, and there should be the opportunity to deliver an immediate ROI. I mean, if you get into data science and you're doing more advanced analytics, then let's look at the loans renewing in the small business portfolio in the next 6 to 9 months, do some analytics around it, and show lift. Let's talk to the line of business leaders and see, okay, I'm responsible for increasing credit cards or mortgage or HELOCs or raising more deposits. Great. We're going to provide you data, measure how well that data helps you achieve your strategic goal, and report that back to you so you can have a quantified lift. That way it's always easier to justify those actions. There's a lot of opportunities in credit union data. In fact, we've documented about 110 things that have been proven to cause uptick. And so just a lot of low-hanging fruit. So normally these start off as no-brainers, and it's in the second year, third year, where we're having to dig a little deeper to find those results. We all know that in credit unions, an extreme minority produce an extreme majority of things. I'll wager that 15% of your active debit card users produce 85% of your interchange income. I'll tell you that 1 to 3, maybe 5 percentiles of your member contribution results in 220% of your total gross member contribution. And then percentiles 4 through 18 or 15 are another 100%, so you're up to 320, 350. And then 16 through 89 take away 100%, and 90 through 100 take away another 100%, and you're back to the 100%. So it's, as we've heard everyone say, it's all about segmentation. But you need those algorithms and those analytics to be able to segment that data. Are they millennials? Millennials can be great by age, but do millennials by their transaction patterns, right? I may look like a millennial by my shopping habits, even though I'm too old to be a millennial, but still you want to segment those people, as Casey suggested, an engagement equation, the member contribution, their use of retentive products and services. It's all about, the reason segmentation is so important is because a lot of credit unions have a next product model that's the average for the credit union, and it's wrong for every segment. It's just the one in the middle, but it's the average of the averages, and it's wrong for the millennials, it's wrong for the executives, it's wrong for the rural, it's wrong for all of his colors, right? And so you need an equation for each of those segments. So first you have to be able to identify those segments and then derive that next product model equation for each of those segments. So what gets measured gets done. Again, that goes back to having the line of business leaders as your customers, and you're trying to provide meaningful lists for action that empower them to achieve their strategic objectives. Again, segmentation's key. And I spoke at this event last year, and I think I brought this up then. And a lot of the BI applications and a lot of the BI focus is on taking my Excel data and its nice, colorful graphs. I've got a nice trend line. I've got, colorful things. I'll submit that, you'll only pay so much for me to tell you what you already know. And you'll only pay so much for telling me what I know I should know, but I don't. And that's like I see the totals by branch, but I want to see it by officer. I see the totals by product, but I want to know it by transaction buckets. The additional drill downs that you get from BI applications. I'll submit that the real value is telling you what you don't know, which is revealed in the machine learning and the advanced analytics within your data segments for each of those groups that's actionable, and then things that you can't possibly know because you're not going to have the PhD statisticians, mathematicians, and you may not have the staff to run R or Python or SPSS, et cetera. So the benefit is really in the advanced analytics. And basically, advanced analytics, I guess it kind of wraps up a lot of what we've heard in these previous presentations. We saw the first tech slide, and I think this one, you know, we could both walk through our same presentations using either slide. They just look a little different, but it all starts with, you know, the first steps of collect, cleanse, compute. But then recognize the top performers. We've heard the feedback loops that are going on in between the optimization. So this takes time, and we heard the the First Tech CEO yesterday say how valuable machine learning is to him and how it's corrected a lot of his intuition over time. And we've all existed on intuition and doing the right thing and member service for a number of years, but this as a fourth leg in the stool can be foundational to our success, and I think it will be in the future, and I'm sure everyone agrees that's why you're here. But it just goes, those feedback loops take some time, and it's iterative learning, and so it's best to get started sooner rather than later. Reweighting the equations comes from your correlation coefficients from those individual results, and so you'll keep optimizing that model to get the best fit. And then again, regression is even going to dictate how you re-segment and go into those details in terms of segmentation. The goal is ultimately predictive and prescriptive statistics, to where we're identifying a trigger every day that maybe here's a good member in a high percentile with a declining engagement algorithm. So they missed their ACH payroll, their debit card transactions are declining, their internet banking usage is going down. Let's reach out to them. Maybe they're moving, but maybe they had a bad experience and they're starting to pull away, and with the conversation, you can re-engage. And then ultimately, when you reach the summit, the best view is that, the officers and the loan officers and the branch teams are waiting on that list to take a prescriptive action because they know it's demonstrated success and it's the best practice in the credit union. So that's the goal, and that's how you'll get engagement, is the frontline staff know that they can rely on the lists and have a certain predictive rate of success, right?
So that kind of brings us to the part where, now that we have been talking about these things and how to do these things, but the question still lingers out there that how do we as a credit union, and I will start with you, Stephen, and then we go down the is how do we as a credit union compete with big financial institutions where they can invest a lot more in their analytics initiatives at the same time with nimble startups that can turn things faster?
Right. I think there's 3,500 credit unions that are below 500 million, right? So they're going to have a hard time finding the staff, much less hiring, training, and then retaining that staff. But credit unions have the first advantage is the collaborative environment. The First Tech and others putting on this kind of conference, Casey and everyone sharing their results. Secondly, a lot of vendors that are helping to empower you. And then I think as Chris said, it doesn't have to be so complex. And there's consultants like us that are there to help you through the hard part of the math or the equations, or accelerate your BI environment. But it's something that, the big banks are investing hundreds of millions. I think Wells Fargo has 600 people building models in an annual budget of $100 million. That was in the American Banker in January. So your best members are their targets, right? So the next product model offerings for your best members to continue that engagement is what levels the playing field. And the help is here through the BI providers and the vendors in the room and the consultants up here, and then the collaborative environment.
Casey?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. We've got, I know a number of vendors, but I see Austin from OnApproach. We're not on OnApproach right now, but we've been working with them. Vendors like that, you know, if I can pick on Sarah over there. Small credit unions banding together to share things. And sometimes they're more formal and sometimes they're less formal, but I think just working together. You know, some of your slide that mentioned some modeling techniques, random forests, you know, even the regression modeling, which is, you know, somewhat simple, but does a great job most of the time. No reason why we all have to recreate that wheel over and over again. Furthermore, sharing the data and the models will make each of our models better because we'll have more samples and we'll have, you know, a better time ferreting out what's overfitting versus underfitting. And so I think collaboration is huge. I also want to take a little bit of umbrage against the premise, though. I don't think any of this should be fear-based, and I don't think any of this should be scarcity-based. I think we should use the abundance we've got in the credit union industry, and maybe not so much aiming for data-driven organizations, but continuing with our value-driven organizations and just using data to help inform our mission. Because I think all of us here realize, if you don't, we talked to Doug here, but you can be making a lot more money in other industries. You realize this, right? Yeah, we're here because I think we value the mission and philosophy of credit union movement. So using data for that is not something that we have competition in the market. The banks and the fintechs, for the most part, are not doing that. So if we serve our members very well by making relevant decisions to them, I think we're going to have no problem. In fact, I wrote about this in my thesis in grad school was about recapturing the credit union spirit that we used to have by knowing the people that walked through the door. We knew their names. We knew what was important to them. We knew what was on their minds. We don't anymore. A lot of us are big. And so what we're trying to do is synthesize some of that relationship to be relevant to them as they come in the door, know what topics they want to talk about, know the products that they need. And so I think that's where we should focus.
And I will actually add to that one is the middle of the last year, sometime around, I was talking to Casey, and he was working on a propensity model, and at the same time, we were getting started on our NBO model that Mike mentioned yesterday. And I actually learned a lot from what he was doing. We hosted a joint webinar together, and it helped cut the cycle time, few things that I was thinking about doing, say, maybe that's not the right way of doing it. Somebody has already done that part. Let's not reinvent the wheel and maybe augment what they have done.
It was helpful for us, too, because we were able to consider a new method.
So, Chris, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I'd like to just also comment about the premise there that how do you compete with these big institutions and the who have a lot of resources. And I think the barrier is not so much the resources. Again, the computation's cheap, memory's cheap. The amount of data you need is fairly small to take the step. It's a lack of will. And in fact, what you see is like, oh, how do I compete with these big institutions? I spent the early part of my career working with a lot of banks and credit card processors. And your smaller size, it makes you more nimble and agile, and you can execute on strategy and vision a lot quicker. If you guys were always at a deficit of these large institutions, you would see a continually splitting of what the big banks do, and you don't. You innovate at the same rate or maybe slightly slower, but you're always catching up. You're always nipping at their heels. You're always putting pressure on them to innovate. So your small size is an advantage. What might be lacking is the will or seeing the value that you can gain out of it. And so you need to be able to take a very measured, focused first step down this path, and you can catch up with them and you can compete with it, no doubt about it.
So actually, let me flip the question then on the other side is we have been talking about that we only need little bit of data. So if we say, how do we take advantage of all the data we have, not just a little bit of data? Like, what's a good way of going about it, Doug?
So one thing that we see in BI type applications, traditional BI is all about cohorts and dividing your data into pieces. And you can learn a lot about your data that way. But what we find is that if you want to take into advantage all of your available data, for example, not just where they live or not just the account age or not just their income, modeling can be much more effective. It could be a very simple model, like a linear model. It could be, something different. And the model isn't really that important, how you do it, but the fact that you model as opposed to just divide your data manually and just explore the data using traditional BI tools.
Yeah, we fight this battle all the time, and in our industry, there's a lot of experience that comes to bear to say we need to divide along age bands, right? I mean, how many of you guys segment based on generations, right? I'm just barely within the millennial category. Hang my head. I asked my boss, who's a Gen Xer, if I could be in Gen X. I said, will you adopt me? Because I don't have anything in common with these people. And he said, no, you can't. And I said, well, why not? I really want to be in Gen X. He says, you don't not care enough to be in Gen X. And I said, yeah. But the point is, there's a lot of stuff that goes into our experience that's not based on age. And it's not based on just income. And it's not just based on where you live. Finding relevant insights about each individual based on their behavior and then a mixture of all this other stuff is where we've found that segmenting was really powerful. We didn't feed into this model any rules beforehand, like a priori rules about we need to look at age bands, and we need, even the subset selection, in other words, the gathering of what inputs to feed into the model had to be vetted and tested itself before. And those things are reconsidered nightly. We run our models nightly to learn things too. And so in a way, it takes a lot of pressure off of all of us to sort of think of all the possibilities and think of all the patterns ahead of time. Puts more pressure on us to get that stuff into the hands of the business leaders who could say, no, you're smoking something here, that's not right, or yeah, that kind of fits. So yeah, couldn't agree more.
So I will ask this last question before we open up for audiences, is it better to say, go out there, buy these analytical tool or build it in-house? Like, which is a preferred method to go about solving these problems around tools specifically?
So it depends on your resources, right? It's one of the 4 C's. Do you have the staff in-house to do it, or do you partner with an On approach or Decision Minds, et cetera? But again, it starts with what is your end goal. So if I identify what my end goal is, then I can pretty quickly identify, do I have the right data and the resources and the tools with the right staff?
All right. We can open it up for audiences.
I was just going to say, if you partner, the onus is still going to be on you to learn some things about it. Because again, if you want to be values driven, nobody has your values, nobody has your data. You own the membership, and so getting a few of these skills into the boardroom is really very important. CAO would do that, maybe. But I think even the CEO and all the way down should take some responsibility in learning some of this stuff. We built everything in-house, and now we're thinking let's try to partner to help us out with as a relief valve. So there's not one right model, I think, is what Steve's saying. But yeah, if you're partnering, be informed about how to partner with it so that you don't lose your soul in the process.
All right. We open up for audience questions. Right here and back there.
Good morning. I'm losing my voice, so I hope I can get this question out. I really appreciate the comments at the end, because what I struggle with the most is the gap between the executive level defining what that question is that they're wanting to answer. We have these high-level words that we want to achieve, or we have 5% deposit growth, or whatever it is, and really quantifying that down into those opportunities for analytics to really hone in on the answers in time for them to not change their mind again and decide that they have another thing that they want to get. So can you speak a little bit? I mean, there seems to be some experience up there, but can you speak a little on that?
Sure, I'll chime in on that. So I think it starts with the strategic plan, which is oftentimes a book of good intentions that sits on our bookshelf until next year, and we look at it again and think, oh, well, those were the things I meant to get done. But if you instead break that down in every initiative. How do we do it? What's measurable? How do we get this done? So 5% growth, okay, great. Well, first we need to understand our deposit attrition, because can we slow down the attrition and then we don't have to get so much new? So where does attrition come from? Because we could hit 5% growth without going after more new and just slow down the rate of exit. But then at the same time, what type of growth do we want? I mean, I can go buy broker CDs tomorrow and get 5% deposit growth on my 5300s, but it's not really the way that I wanted to go with core deposits. So, what's the product? What's the marketing? So to me, 5% deposit growth from a chief strategy officer perspective, I'd say, all right, let's break that down into its components, make a plan for each one, set a milestone that we're going to measure, and then start the analytics and do the math. And it's got to be, it's the smaller credit unions especially, everyone's wearing multiple hats. So I think the service, whether it's in-house or provided outsource, has got to have a monthly or quarterly touch base. Here's where we said we wanted to be. Here's the progress. Let's adjust and repeat. And that's a lot of those feedback loops that helps, get to the models and better models and driving that change and communicating it down too.
As a follow-up, how do you help your executive team understand that they want to invest the time in those check-ins and making those goals? Because the first thing is growth, and then you start asking attrition or whatever, and they're done. They don't want to think about it. They just want the growth. So you want to be accountable, and you want to show the value in what you're doing, because you know that at the peer level, they're seeing value. But how do you then fully push it forward to the organizational strategy of that 5% and say, you know what, this particular piece that we learned here, did this, and I guess maybe it's in arrears in order to build a reputation. But that's something I've struggled with and we've struggled with as an organization for a while now.
Can I address that?
Yeah.
No, this works. I think what comes into play here is the soft skills of data science, the consultative skills, and that's the hard problem is not doing the math or executing the code. The hard part is exactly the thing you're bringing up, is managing expectations, setting expectations. So you need to have a clear line of communication with the person that's requesting it. You have to be in contact with them, continuously. I don't think you can go away for 3 weeks. I think like a weekly, you have to have a conversation with them at least once a week, and you have to let them know at each point where you are on this. Now you spoke about like I have this goal, but there's some levers that I don't know what they are, and so that throws a little bit of unknown into it. But there's tools and methods to try and learn what those levers are, and you have to work through it as a problem and get to a solution or an answer or a tentative solution really quickly, so you know where you are. That is critical to success in this, right? I take a lot of this from my colleagues in the department about getting a minimal viable product out, right? What's the smallest model? What's the simplest thing you can do to show progress, right? And get some feedback to know where you are. And you got to get there quickly. And this is not talking weeks. Right, a good person will do it in days, and then identify what all what you're missing and where you can go from there. And then always give it open. You can kill this project now. Don't if this doesn't look like it's going to get where it is, be honest and open. And if it doesn't look like it's going to get where it is, be ready to walk away from that project. There's a ton of things to do.
Yeah, to add to that, regardless, does this work? Regardless of your industry that you're in and what kind of project you're working on, here in data scientists, we're often trying to change things. And change is hard because change has resistance. There's always some entrenched process that people are used to. They're comfortable. They know what they'll get. And if you want to propose a different approach, maybe a data-driven approach, you have to be able to demonstrate and sell that. And just having the answer without selling it is the same as not doing it at all. And one tool for doing that is to do an A/B test or try things, do a small-scale test and see how well it works. And then if it looks good, you do it more.
Hi. How let's say you have a problem and you're trying to solve this problem or a question. How do you find the attributes or the demographics that you feed your model without putting in your own bias? You know, everybody, like you said earlier, segmenting based on age or segmenting based on preferred channel.
It kind of depends if your goal is to describe the data in a way that you can interpret, or if you want the best possible way, like a competitive, optimal result. What we found is that almost all information has a little bit of performance gain. Some a lot, but there's a very long tail of a little bit of gain, but not that much. It depends how much data you have. If you don't have much data to work with, then you can only use a few different, a smaller number of free variables. But what we do with our models when we have a lot of data is we throw a lot of things in, not really knowing if they're beneficial or not, and then regularize your model to control overfit. We get the best competitive result that way. And that's why some of our models are big, but it only works if you have the data to support it.
Yeah, and from a credit union perspective, I think the short answer to your question is that that's not possible, that it's always going to be biased by what you think, unless you have, a very finite number of attributes that you can use, and then, throw them all in there. There's a number of models, though, a number of methods in statistics that will help you to select the best attributes. So there's best subset selection, there's the lasso method, and all of this stuff is documented in the open source literature. Stanford has a great set of articles. If you guys haven't checked out Introduction to Statistical Learning in R, this is an open source course taught by Stanford professors, and they go through a chapter on how to select the things to even feed into the model. But ultimately, you're going to be informing your decision of candidate attributes through your own perspective. And so that is bias. And that's what I mean by values driven. You're going to need those people that have been in the industry for 30 years to tell you what their intuition is and what they believe, and then you use the model to test it. I don't think that's a bad thing at all, but I don't think it's possible to remove bias.
But I think it's a great question because it just more points to the fact that you have to get started, because at first your segmentation has to be based on your intuition, right? And then, the millennials and the Gen X's, I'd love to see replaced by how they use their transaction patterns. How do they look? How do they behave within their segments? And you re-segment based on these statistical methods. So that takes some time. It takes some iterative feedback loops. And then, it starts being less bias and more determined by how they use their products and services, which is really what you want the equations focused on. That's going to speak to those people because of how their habits of using your credit union. At the end of the day, it's all about, if I have the top 5% at 2 years, 2-year membership and plus, and I've got 5 percentiles that make over a certain member contribution, recognizing the members at 2 weeks and 2 months that could look like they could be heading that direction and helping kind of herd the room full of cats, to where in 18 months I have 7% instead of 5% that are over that dollar threshold of member contribution. So, that's, you want all those specific types of measures of success, but it's going to be multiple iterations to get your segmentation right, make it less biased.
I would say, too, I would posit that segmentation is one of the few clear use cases of what they call unsupervised learning. It can be supervised or unsupervised. If you just want to get a better understanding of your membership and how they interact and, just generally break them up, you don't have a supervising output or goal in mind, you can cluster those members together, and attributes are wide open for that. If you have a goal, like you want to, increase profitability, I would say segment to that. If you have another goal to decrease delinquencies, segment to that. You'll end up with a whole bunch of segmentation models that are aimed at specific purposes. Ultimately, I think what we're getting to is what they call a segment of one, right? And that, again, is knowing that, Joe member walking in on the street, you know their name, you've seen them before, you have a conversation with them. That's a segment of one. I think it's achievable if you don't limit yourself to just one model to serve everything, right? And then you can execute on the second and third and fourth model in a number of hours, whereas the first one might have taken you 3 weeks to figure it out, right?
You have a question back there.
Yeah, I love the lead-in segment of one. So when you work with these systems and you come up with the revelations and the aha moments, when you turn it into sales or fulfillment or getting it out there through your various channels, any lessons learned in terms of what works, what doesn't work? A lot of these findings probably have a half-life of about 24 hours, and you're trying to get them out in front of your folks. So any changes there or learnings you can pass on the fulfillment side?
Sure. At the end of the day, these models are almost always changing something with operations. And just like getting buy-in with the executives who are supporting this effort, you have to get buy-in early with the people that are going to be affected by this, right? Get their buy-in. In terms of, the lifetime of the models, things change all the time. You have to test for that. You have to understand what the lifetime model is. You got to look at your calibration curves and check them to make sure they're going. You have to, you don't build a model and never revisit it. That's not the way it works. You have to revisit it and retrain it and understand, have a retraining schedule for it, whether it's daily or monthly or quarterly, whatever it is. You can't just put something out there and walk away from it, which presents a problem because you have each time you build these models that you're going to put into operations, it does come with a maintenance expense associated with it that you have to care for.
We just used I'll give you an example. We had a credit card department came with a marketing department and wanted propensity model for direct mail campaigns for credit cards. And so we put one together and got it out into the market pretty quickly. And it was really good at getting people to respond for the offer. And then, just horrendous at getting qualified applicants to respond. And so, of course, I deflected blame on everyone else. But I really did. And so we had to retool it and say, okay, well, the goal wasn't, the research question here wasn't how to get more people to respond to the offer. It was how to get qualified people to respond. And so, but like I said before, the first model, it maybe took us 4 or 5 days to put that together, and it was breaking and rebuilding itself every night. We automated that, but it still wasn't the right supervising output, and so we built the next model in a couple of hours and retested it, got that back into the market for the next cycle, and cost per acquisition is down quite a bit by, I think it was at one time over $100 per card to acquire before we did this, and now it's like $35. So I can't say that it's all because of me. Actually, I can't. It was me. We changed some of the parameters of the card too, so I don't want to mislead you. But just reconsidering being open to change and that kind of thing. And if that fails, a good cocktail of social shaming and deflection is good if it doesn't work.
And I think it's about developing a set of recurring best practices, and seasonality and cyclical trends affect credit union models a lot. Back to school shopping time, Christmas shopping time. Those offers, a lot of times it's a particular message even within that segment. So what A/B testing, which one works best within that segment, you'll resegment. Again, it's iterations, it's measurement, and you have to find the truths. It may be maybe it was 6% overall, but you can find the segment where it was actually 20%. So let's use that offer at that time for those members, and we're back to finding something that moves the meter on the other population. So the segmentation is a battle that never stops. You're always trying to get down to that segment of one where that message just resonates, thank you, and you pop it on internet banking and mobile, in your digital channels at the right time, and that may be cyclical, it may be when certain transactions have occurred, and that's the machine learning.
And what I will add to that one, that it actually goes back to the very first step where you started, that what we were actually solving for, if somebody walks up to me and say, I want to know how many of my members buy Starbucks, my obvious question is, what will you do if I tell you 50, or what will you do if I tell you 5,000? If those questions are not framed early on, then we have to watch out for a lot more stuff at the tail end of it. And it's also a educational process that we are building models, but we are transitioning them to other folks that are dealing with our member, their problems. So educating them on that process, that what happens when this process breaks, or maybe you are no worse off than if you used it and it still breaks. So that is an iterative process, and we keep going back to that one. And with that one, my lights are flashing over here. I want to say thank you to all and our panel. Thank you.
Good job, guys.
Thank you, Jason.